Before we begin, a quick note. The opinions and analysis shared on Truth Seekers are our own interpretations of published research and should not be used as medical, financial, or professional advice. Always consult qualified professionals for decisions affecting your health or well-being.
And with that out of the way, welcome to Truth Seekers. I'm Bill Morrison.
And I'm Alex Barrett. Today is January 12th, 2026, and we're talking about your morning coffee might save your life, or maybe not.
Let's get to the truth.
Right, so I'm scrolling through my newsfeed this morning with my coffee, and I see this headline: Coffee and tea linked to lower cancer risk in groundbreaking study. And I'm thinking, brilliant, I can feel virtuous about my caffeine addiction now.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one too. The 41% lower risk number was everywhere.
Everywhere. And it's not some dodgy blog either. It's published in a proper journal called Cancer from the American Cancer Society. Big study, over 25,000 people.
That's a huge effect size if it's real. Right, so naturally, I did what I always do when a headline sounds too good to be true. I went looking for the actual study. And
And Bill, the gap between what the headlines say and what the research actually shows, it's enormous.
okay, how enormous are we talking?
Well, for starters, remember that 41% lower risk that's plastered everywhere? That applies to exactly one specific type of cancer, hypopharyngeal cancer, which is the rarest subtype, and only at one specific dose, which is 3 to 4 cups daily.
Hmm. So they took the most impressive number from multiple analyses and made that the headline.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The headlines are all coffee and tea lower cancer risk, right? Lumping them together as these protective beverages.
Yeah, I saw that framing everywhere. The actual study found that if you drink more than 1 cup of tea per day, you have a 38% higher risk of laryngeal cancer. Not lower, higher. Wait, what? So in the same study, coffee appears protective, but tea at higher doses appears harmful?
Precisely. And that contradiction was buried in the coverage. Everyone's focused on the coffee benefit, nobody's talking about the tea harm.
Okay, but hold on. That's actually a huge red flag. If both beverages were truly protective through some biological mechanism, you wouldn't expect one to increase cancer risk. That suggests we're not looking at a real protective effect. We're looking at confounding.
That's what I thought. But I'm wondering if we're dismissing the tea finding too quickly. What if tea at high doses actually does something harmful? Like maybe the temperature issue or tannins or something we're not thinking about?
I mean, it's possible, but you'd expect to see that pattern consistently across studies. And we don't. This feels more like noise to me.
But if it's just noise, why is the coffee finding any more believable? They're from the same study with the same methodology.
That's actually a fair point.
I'm not saying the tea harm is definitely real. I'm saying the contradiction tells us something, that the study probably can't tell us what's actually going on. And I think that matters more than you're giving it credit for.
Yeah, okay, you're right. The contradiction is the story, not which specific number we should believe.
Right, so let's talk about what this study actually did, because the methodology matters here.
Okay, so this is what's called a pooled case control study. They took 14 existing studies and combined the data: 9,548 people with head and neck cancer and about 15,783 people without cancer as controls.
Okay,
And they asked people to recall how much coffee and tea they drank. We're talking retrospective questionnaires where participants remember their prior consumption.
Hang on. So they're asking people who already have cancer to remember how much coffee they drank years ago.
Exactly. And that's where recall bias becomes a massive problem.
Because if I've been diagnosed with cancer and I've read articles about coffee being healthy or unhealthy, that's going to influence how I remember and report my consumption.
Right. And here's the thing, this is an observational study, not an experiment. Nobody was randomly assigned to drink coffee or not drink coffee. The researchers are just looking at patterns in people who already chose their own coffee habits.
Which means you can find associations, but you can't prove causation.
Exactly. It's like noticing that people who carry umbrellas are more likely to be around when it's raining, and concluding that umbrellas cause rain.
I love that analogy because it highlights how absurd the causal leap is. These headlines are saying coffee prevents cancer, but the study design fundamentally cannot tell us that.
And there are so many alternative explanations for what they're seeing. Let's talk about confounding.
Please do.
Okay, so think about who drinks coffee historically. In the 1950s through the 1990s, coffee drinking and smoking were highly correlated behaviors. Coffee and cigarettes went together.
And smoking is a massive risk factor for head and neck cancer.
Exactly. Now, the researchers did adjust for smoking in their analysis, but coffee drinking and smoking are so intertwined that you're likely to have residual confounding. Some of what looks like a coffee benefit might actually be capturing people who quit smoking but kept drinking coffee.
Wait, haven't we done this before? This feels familiar.
Done what?
Coffee and confounding. Didn't we cover something like this with the timing thing?
Oh, yeah, the morning coffee versus all day coffee study. That was about heart disease, though, not cancer.
Right, but it's the same problem, isn't it? Observational study can't separate coffee from everything else about coffee drinkers.
Yeah, I feel like we're just doing the greatest hits of confounding at this point.
Well, it keeps coming up because researchers keep making the same mistakes. Anyway, sorry, what were we saying about smoking?
Right, so the protective effect might not be coffee at all, it might just be less smoking. But there's also healthy user bias. People who drink coffee regularly might also be people who exercise more, eat better, have better access to healthcare, higher socioeconomic status, all things associated with lower cancer risk.
The coffee itself becomes irrelevant.
Right. And then there's reverse causation, which is a huge problem in case control studies.
Explain that one.
So the study is comparing people who have cancer to people who don't and asking about their past behavior. But what if early undiagnosed cancer causes symptoms like fatigue and loss of appetite, which leads people to drink less coffee? Then the group of non coffee drinkers includes a bunch of people with undiagnosed early cancer.
So it's not that coffee prevented cancer, it's that cancer caused people to stop drinking coffee.
Exactly. You can't determine temporal sequence with this design. You don't know what came first.
And this is why randomized trials are the gold standard.
Right. But you're not going to do a 20-year randomized trial where you force half the people to drink coffee and half to abstain. It's not practical.
So we're stuck with observational data that can't answer the causal question, but the headlines are making causal claims anyway.
And here's something that really got me when I read the actual paper. The researchers acknowledged that their questions didn't include duration of coffee or tea consumption, concentrations, types of coffee or tea, beverage temperature, or processing techniques.
Wait, They don't know if people drank their coffee hot or cold.
Nope.
That's actually quite significant, isn't it? Because I've seen stuff about hot beverages and esophageal cancer.
Yeah, the International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies drinking very hot beverages as possibly carcinogenic due to thermal injury to the esophagus.
So the thing that might actually cause cancer, the temperature, wasn't even measured. But we're supposed to believe coffee prevents cancer.
It gets better. The studies in this analysis were primarily from North America and Europe, and the researchers explicitly state that this limits the generalizability of these results to other populations because consumption habits in South America, Africa, and Asia are different.
Different types of tea, especially.
Right, like green tea versus black tea has completely different antioxidant profiles, and the study couldn't distinguish between them in the analysis.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight. We have recall bias. We have confounding from smoking and healthy user effects. We have reverse causation. We can't measure temperature or tea type. The results might not apply to most of the world's population.
And we have contradictory findings where tea appears harmful at higher doses, which, like you said earlier, suggests the associations aren't reflecting a real biological protective effect.
But the headline is Coffee and Tea Linked to Lower Cancer Risk.
Right,
And people are going to read that and think, great, I should drink more coffee to prevent cancer.
which is exactly the problem.
When I was covering health stories at the paper, this is how it worked. You've got a study with complex, messy findings. Some associations go one way, some go the other. Lots of limitations. But you need a headline that gets clicks.
So you pick the most impressive number 41% lower risk, and you lead with that.
And you use language like linked to lower cancer risk, which sounds scientific but is vague enough that you're not technically lying. But the average reader interprets linked to as causes or prevents.
And nobody reads down to paragraph 12, where they might mention the study can't prove causation.
If they mention it at all. Most of the coverage I saw didn't include the limitations or the contradictory T findings.
And here's what frustrates me about this: the actual researchers were pretty careful in their language. The senior author said, coffee and tea habits are fairly complex, and these findings support the need for more data and further studies.
Translation: we don't actually know if this is real. Don't change your behaviour based on this.
Right, but that nuance gets completely lost in translation from the journal article to the press release to the news coverage.
And then you've got people making health decisions based on information that's been stripped of all its caveats and uncertainty.
So, what should people actually take away from this?
First, be really skeptical when you see headlines claiming that a food or beverage prevents disease based on observational studies. Observational studies can show associations, but they can't prove causation.
And look for contradictory findings. If the same study shows coffee is protective but tea is harmful, that's a sign that you're not looking at a real biological effect. You're probably looking at confounding or other biases.
Second, ask what kind of study it is. If researchers are asking people to remember what they ate or drank years ago, that's a recall bias problem. If it's observational rather than experimental, it can't establish causation no matter how big the sample size is.
25,000 people sounds impressive, but it doesn't fix the fundamental design problems.
Right. And pay attention to what wasn't measured. In this case, temperature, which might actually matter for cancer risk, wasn't captured at all.
The bottom line is We don't know if coffee prevents cancer. We know that in some observational studies, coffee drinkers had less cancer, but that's not the same thing.
It could be confounding, it could be bias, it could be reverse causation.
If you enjoy coffee, drink it. There's no evidence it's harmful for most people. But don't expect it to be medicine based on this evidence.
And if you're a journalist covering these studies, please include the limitations. Tell people it's observational. Explain that association isn't causation. Your readers deserve the full picture, not just the clickable bits.
Because when you strip away the nuance, you're not informing people, you're misleading them.
Exactly. And we've all got enough misinformation to deal with without headlines turning every observational study into a miracle cure.
Cheers to that. I'm going to go make another coffee.
Same. But I'm doing it because I like coffee, not because I think it's preventing cancer. Right, that's all for today's dive into the data. Just remember, everything we've discussed is our interpretation of published research and shouldn't replace professional medical advice.
Absolutely. If you're dealing with health or mental concerns, talk to your doctor, not just us data nerds on a podcast.
I'm Alex Barrett,
And I'm Bill Morrison.
and we'll see you next time.
On Truth Seekers,
Until then, question everything.
but verify with data.